What is the most chaotic good thing you've done? Accidentally dropping customer belongings, so I'm required to replace them at no cost. Normally, you break a thing, you go to the technicians and pay a fee to replace/repair it. If an employee dropped a customer's stuff, the customer can turn and say, "Hey, this only started because/you/brand name had dropped it." So the rule was to just replace it with what we can. If it's an older model and not around anymore, they get a new one. I only ever did it twice. One was a younger girl that spent her saved birthday and holiday money on an, unbeknownst to her, imitation MP3 player, so we weren't supposed to replace it. But how do you tell an 8-year-old that she wasted all her money from years? Tough lesson. Poor me got butterfingers, I guess, since I dropped it. Other lady was very pregnant, busted phone, and her mother in the hospital that she had on her computer on Skype almost the whole time as it wasn't looking so good. Phone was out of warranty, not easy to use. She clearly had a lot going on and oh no, dumb me, dropping things all over. Now we have to replace it, but on our dime instead. Shucks. Hope you moved your pictures to the drive or something. I had neighbors for about a year that mistreated their dogs. We live in the south, and it wasn't uncommon for them to leave them outside all day long while they were at work chained up and without any water. During the summer they did it almost every day, so I stole their dogs and gave them to my friend's dad because he had a lot of property and treated his dogs like royalty. Hacked a school computer, left a note that I had hacked it and what I could see. The next week, machine was no longer on the network. They had every single student's SSNS, links to it, photos in a public directory, and full contact details unprotected in a Microsoft Access database. How did I hack it? I used Microsoft Remote Desktop to log into what I thought was my assigned machine in another lab using the default student account. It was not the machine I thought it was. We had been in a lecture for about 3 hours. Everybody clearly wanted a break, but the lecturer wouldn't let us have one and was pushing on. I downloaded a remote app for my phone and used it to turn the screen off. The lecturer turned it back on and I turned it off again. We all got a 10-minute break while he spoke to the ed department to see what was going on. This deed was not done by me, but for me. Having recently cut back a forest's worth of English ivy from our new property and finding that the stack of ivy was cold and green and wouldn't light, my husband decided to add a generous portion of gasoline to the pile. The ensuing fireball caused great alarm to our neighbors, who called the fire department. When the engines arrived, the fire had already burnt out, fast and hot. The fire chief found 2 young idiots with the remains of a bonfire and told us that technically it is illegal to have a fire outside of the home unless you are cooking something. He said that last part slowly, with a wink. We looked at him blankly for a moment, nodding, until the light bulb went on and I ran inside to produce a bag of marshmallows from the kitchen. The fire chief smiled and led the firefighters out of our yard, saving us from a huge fine. I was working at a pizza place. I got an order for $75 worth of food. The customer walked in when it was about done. At first I thought she was mad because she wasn't responding to me. I asked her what was wrong. She broke down crying. Her house had just burned down. She had nothing. Her and her 5 kids were living with her mom. I gave her a hug and talked to her for a bit. When she left I cancelled her order and put the money back on her card. She realized what I did a few days later and sent me a very heartwarming letter. I'm not entirely sure if this called chaotic good or not, but I'm sure someone will appreciate the story. I was working in a restaurant that required all servers, food runners, and bus boys to wear Vans. It was a hip urban scratch kitchen, so everyone wore skinny jeans, Vans, and all the dudes had beards. For the servers, it wasn't a huge deal. But bus boys and food runners, me, spent a great deal of our time in the kitchen. Vans plus kitchen floor does not mix well. People were constantly slipping. I got fed up. So I just started wearing non-slip kitchen shoes without asking. Someone in management eventually noticed and told me I could wear Vans or get fired. So I brought up OSHA requirements. Since I was OSHA certified from my previous job, I was well versed in kitchen safety requirements. I didn't threaten to call OSHA, I just mentioned that OSHA safety compliance requires all staff whose primary work positions are located in a kitchen to wear non-slip shoes. It didn't work. I wanted to keep my job, so I didn't threaten to report them. What I did instead was a little malicious compliance. The next day I came in with vans. Now, one thing I was known for was my ability to carry an inhuman amount of plates. I could stack them up and down both arms and balance them. Never dropped a single one. It actually earned me direct tips, which food runners never got. So I loaded up my arms and intentionally slipped, losing well over $100 worth of food to the floor. And I immediately pretended like my back was in serious pain, even though I barely felt it through the fat. My manager immediately went into crisis prevention mode and brought me into the office, obviously trying to avoid the list of lawsuits I could bring down on him for OSHA violations and workplace injury due to gross negligence. Instead, I offered him a simple solution: let us wear non-slip shoes and I won't file for workman's comp, report them to OSHA, or sue for forcing me to wear improper footwear at the threat of losing my job. He happily agreed, not realizing all of this was a setup on my end. All he saw was the money and possibly job he was about to lose. He thought he came out on top while giving me and everyone else exactly what we wanted. All I had to do was take one for the team and pretend to get hurt. From that day forward, all primary kitchen staff were made to wear non-slip shoes. Nobody else slipped once in my time there, and our financial loss to floor food was cut down significantly. I bought the domain for a local hate group and turned it into a furry fetishes site. I'd almost forgotten about this. Way back in Diablo 2's heyday, people got their accounts stolen by scammers all the time. I got mine stolen because I was 14 and stupid. After a while of sulking I moved on, but a few days after it happened a friend of a friend showed me how to recover it. Apparently there was a difference in the synchronization between regions for account credentials. The US was up to date on a patch while EU wasn't. This means that if someone took your account and changed the password, it was lost on us, but on EU it was still in the database with the old password. Funny quirk was that if you logged into EU with the old password, it reverted the US login credentials to the old one as well. Once I was wise to how it worked, I opened a small business as a stolen account hunter. I'd post in chat that I can help those who'd been hit. All I needed was the password of their account before it was taken and changed on us. I'd take them to a private channel, explain the process, and go about it. If they trusted me, I'd rejoin the channel with the old account and ask them if it was it. If it was, then I'd collect a fee by taking an item of my choosing and trading it to my account for compensation. They'd get their account back. I got an item I might have been looking for, and everyone was happy, except the scammer who I stole from. In college, one of the ras in my dorm created a seasonal/temporary bulletin board, physical board, not an internet thing, called a grievance board. I believe the concept was humorous and based on something from Seinfeld, which may give you an idea of how long ago I went to college. The idea was that people would anonymously post their grievances about their fellow dorm mates in a theoretically good-natured manner. The reality ended up being that, while some of it was well-spirited, it ended up devolving into a platform for harassment of specific people. And while no one would admit publicly to having their feelings hurt, several different people admitted to me and another friend privately that it made them feel really awful. So one day me and that friend set an alarm for 3:30 AM, snuck to the board, and quietly took the whole thing down, leaving a typed anonymous message in its place that, while we appreciated the spirit in which the board was intended, it was causing more harm than good. A train station I went through every day had one of those shitty talking signs that admonishes anything that moves nearby not to take luggage on the escalator. Always the same message, and it plays this regardless of whether they have luggage or are even approaching the escalator, which happened approximately every 20 seconds. It annoyed me when I was just waiting for 15 minutes, and I can only assume it was worse for the workers in the food places right nearby. The workers couldn't do anything about it without risking punishment. I could though. Every time I went through the station I'd unplug that thing. I had a job during high school, but didn't have any real bills to pay, so I gave away a lot of my money. but for some reason I was embarrassed about it. IDK, I guess I didn't want anyone to think I was giving money to get attention or recognition, so I would slip money into donation jars, only if no one was looking. One time my classroom was doing a fundraising collection for an earthquake or something like that, and I felt really strongly that I wanted to help, so when I had a minute loan I slipped what was left of my paycheck into the jar. It was around $80. My teacher came into the room, saw the money, and got kinda weird about it. Who did this? Who put this money in here? Nobody answered. I wanted to die inside. He kept pushing. He started asking individual students. Was it you? Did you see who it was? Everyone kept saying no, we don't know who did it. Before he got to me, another teacher interrupted. I think that whoever put the money in there probably didn't want anyone to know it was them, and you should stop. Thank you, other teacher. I worked in an animal hospital years ago. A lady brought in a very sweet, docile 1-year-old female pit bull to have put down. She claimed the dog bit her when she tried to break up a fight it was having with her other dog. Every dog owner worth anything knows to never reach into a dog fight, because you will most definitely get bit. Our hospital policy was that we would not do convenience euthanasias, but since the dog actually bit someone we were obligated. If my memory serves me right, the dog was also not current on its rabies vaccine, which means once it's euthanized federal law states you have to have the dead dog's brain tested for rabies at an out-of-state lab. Use your imagination on what we have to do to that dog to have its brain sent to that lab. We tried pleading with the owner, but it was clear she just wanted to get rid of the dog. She filled the euthanasia paperwork out and left. Me and a few other staff members took the dog and put it in an isolation area as opposed to the treatment area where hospital procedures take place. It was a busy hospital and the vets had their hands full. Maybe they forget the dog was there. Maybe we forgot to put the euthanasia on the whiteboard. Maybe one of us took the dog and founded a loving home. Helped a homeless guy steal from a takeaway. About 5 years ago it was the kind of independently owned place that does pizza, fried chicken and kebabs. And I had quite a bit to drink. He tried to buy food, the clerk told him to get out. He had the money for this meal. I then said to buy him the food and to go sit down and wait. The clerk went over and told him to get lost. He got a little upset saying I just want to eat something. I have money, but the probably 19-year-old clerk wouldn't have it. He got a bit upset and walked outside. I see him go and he sit in a bench just outside and put his head in his hands like he was about to weep. When THW Clark came back to serve me, I ordered both our food and she said I'm not going to give you what he wanted because then he will always come in here begging for handouts. I said to her I'm a paying customer and I want to buy these 2 meals. She then said I will only sell you 1 meal. My response, having not paid for anything yet, was, okay then, well now this is happening. I turned to the next counter and picked up the tray of food that was just about to be handed over to a customer and saying to her make sure they give you another meal, knowing full well they would have too as she hasn't even sat down with it. I then walked straight out the front door up to the homeless gent and handed him the meal. The look of shock on his face as the clerk came outside. I just stepped in front of her and kept repeating you have no right to touch me, while my new friend steadily paced away with the tray of hot food. More of the staff came out to intervene, and they said the police had been called as I had committed theft. I ran away in my stupor and have not entered the shop since. I was in charge of the kids' food department at work once. I was the longest running member of staff there, and we had no managers for that department. I was in charge of doing the rota for the day as I knew how it worked and what was needed. 2 of my coworkers flirted relentlessly when they were both in the same day, and it just so happened to be a quiet day, so I put them both to be on lunch break together, and for me to just be around in one of the not so busy departments. I could trust them both to do their jobs, and as it wasn't busy, they were able to talk and connect all day. They went on lunch together, and they came back together practically holding hands. It was so cute. They dated, not so, secretly for a while, so I like to think I did some good. Basically pulled a Ferris Bueller to help my buddy's GF get out of school. We were college freshmen at the time, and she was her HS senior, and she really wanted to surprise her BF for his birthday at college, since they were doing the long distance thing. So I took the day off from classes and drove up to her school a couple hours away. She had already come up with a doctor's excuse, but I called the front office to verify it, and they let her go. Don't know if they actually believed it, or just didn't care, but I stayed in the car with shades on to keep up appearances in case they were watching. Thankfully, since we left so early we were able to make it back in time to surprise my buddy for his day. Feel like I did some good, because they ended up staying together through HS and into college and now they are married. My 12th grade teacher couldn't get permission to take our class on an excursion, so he found the date of our cultural diversity day for that year coincided with his scheduled paternity leave, and there was no chance his wife would still be pregnant at that point. He encouraged us all to skip school that day, meet in the city, and go to this museum exhibit as a group. He met us there with his family. We grabbed lunch as a class afterwards. It was great. Instead of watching the football team do the haka and being bored all day, we got to learn about Pompeii. It also gave me the attitude of there's no point on being in school for days you're not learning or participating. So if my kids aren't interested in sports days or things when they are older, we can go to the zoo or museums or bushwalk or some other activity they'd actually benefit from. A friend and I wrote a composition together for a high school music class that was supposed to be an individual work. Her teacher gave her an A and mine gave me a C for the identical piece. I brought up the discrepancy with my teacher, mostly to point out that he was a douche canoe. His response was to correctly point out that what we did was plagiarism and failed us both for the assignment. I approached him later and confessed that she wrote the composition and I copied her work. He said he appreciated my honesty and would restore her mark to an A and allow me to rewrite. We both ended up with As.